Zuri Adeyemi grew up in a world most people could only dream about. At 25, she lived in a glass penthouse overlooking Johannesburg, driven around in black luxury cars, and treated like the future queen of her father's steel empire. Everyone knew her father, Chief Kamau Adeyemi, the billionaire who built half the bridges and rail lines across South Africa. People assumed Zuri would one day take his place, and honestly, she believed it too. Since she was a child, her father told her, "One day, this empire will be yours." Those words became her whole identity. But everything changed the day Naledi entered their lives. Stunning, elegant, and always dressed like she was walking a runway, Naledi became Zuri's stepmother, and immediately made it clear she didn't see Zuri as family. She saw her as a threat. Naledi would smile in public, but behind closed doors, her comments cut like knives. She questioned Zuri's decisions, mocked her ideas, and acted like Zuri didn't deserve the throne she'd been raised for. Zuri tried to stay respectful, tried to believe they could coexist. But Naledi treated her like a rival, not a daughter. Still, Zuri held on to her dream. She studied business, shadowed her father at meetings, and prepared herself to lead. People envied her life, thinking she had everything: wealth, power, destiny. But inside the mansion, tension grew thicker every day. Naledi whispered. Chief listened less. Zuri felt something shifting. Then, one quiet evening, everything shattered. Chief collapsed. And suddenly, rumors spread like wildfire, rumors that pointed straight at Naledi. The day of the will reading felt like a movie, cold, tense, and unreal. Zuri walked into her father's corporate headquarters, a skyscraper wrapped in glass and security. Cameras flashed outside. Reporters shouted her name. Everyone was waiting to see who would take over the Adeyemi empire. Inside, the boardroom was locked down like a military base. Guards at the doors, biometric scanners, long polished table, and every family member sitting stiff and silent. Zuri tried to steady her breathing. This was supposed to be the moment her father's promise became reality. Naledi arrived last, dripping diamonds, gliding in like she owned the world. She didn't even look at Zuri, just took her seat with a slow, confident smile. The lawyer opened a thick folder, cleared his throat, and the room leaned in. Zuri felt her heart racing. For 25 years, she'd been told she was the heir. She imagined her father's voice, imagined him proud. But the lawyer's first words punched the air out of her lungs. As stated in the final will, Mrs. Naledi Adeyemi is granted full access and ownership of all liquid assets, estates, and executive holding. Estimated value, $1.4 billion. Gasps. Chairs creaked. Someone dropped a pen. Naledi didn't blink. She just smiled wider. Zuri froze. Billion? All of it? Her mind spun. The lawyer kept reading, as if announcing a weather report. And for Miss Zuri Adeyemi, Zuri sat up, waiting, hoping. She inherits sole ownership of Adeyemi Manufacturing Plant 3. A single factory. A failing, debt-choked company everyone knew was barely breathing. The room went silent. People exchanged awkward glances. Some even looked pitying. Zuri felt heat rush to her face. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a rejection. Naledi leaned close, pretending to fix her earring, and whispered without even hiding her satisfaction. Try not to embarrass his name. Zuri's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to believe this was a mistake. But the documents were stamped, signed, final. Her father, the man who told her she was the future, had left her nothing but a sinking ship. As she walked out, phones buzzed. Notifications exploded. By the time she reached the lobby, headlines were already everywhere. Billionaire's wife takes control. Zuri Adeyemi left with failing company. Unprepared, unworthy, unfit to lead. The internet turned her into a punchline. Comment sections mocked her. Talk shows called her the spoiled princess who couldn't earn her crown. Naledi, meanwhile, left through a private exit, smiling for cameras, waving like a victorious queen. She gave a short statement about honoring Chief's legacy, acting heartbroken and noble, while Zuri became the face of failure. Outside, reporters swarmed her, shouting questions she couldn't even process. She stood there, numb, holding a folder with the deed to a company everyone expected to collapse within. The empire she was born to lead was gone. The world had already counted her out. And for the first time in her life, Zuri realized no one was coming to save her. In the days after the will reading, Zuri could barely breathe. The world thought she was weak, clueless, and undeserving. But the pain that cut the deepest was knowing her father chose Naledi over her. She kept replaying his last months, searching for signs she missed. That's when the memories started hitting her like broken glass. Moments she had ignored, moments that now made terrifying sense. Flashback 1, months before Chief fell ill. Zuri had arrived for a board meeting she'd been preparing for all week. She wanted to present a new idea for expansion into East Africa. But when she reached the doors, security stopped her. Your access has been revoked, Miss Adeyemi. She laughed at first, thinking it was a glitch. Then she saw Naledi standing behind the glass, talking to executives, acting like she belonged there. When Zuri confronted her later, Naledi smiled sweetly and said, "You should focus on being young. Leave the heavy decisions to adults." At the time, Zuri brushed it off as arrogance. Now she understood. It was the beginning of the lockout. Flashback 2, a charity gala. Zuri overheard two businessmen whispering about, "I heard she's irresponsible. Chief said she's not ready for leadership." Zuri had never heard her father say such words. But later that night, she saw Naledi leaning close to him, speaking softly, her hand on his arm, her voice calm and poisonous. "She embarrasses you," Naledi murmured. "She doesn't respect your legacy." Chief looked tired, stressed, uncertain. Naledi didn't need to shout. She planted seeds. Seeds that grew into doubt. Flashback 3, the lawyer's office. Weeks before Chief's collapse, Zuri had tried to schedule a meeting with her father about succession. His assistant said he wasn't available. But as she turned to leave, the lawyer stepped out of his office, startled to see her. Papers were on his desk, documents stamped with seals. She recognized her father's signature. Naledi's too. When the lawyer tried to close the door, Zuri caught a glimpse of the title, Revision of Estate Distribution. She asked what it meant. He said the meeting was private. Naledi appeared moments later, placing a hand on the lawyer's shoulder, and said calmly, "Zuri, stop creating drama. You're not involved in these matters anymore." It was the first time she felt truly shut out, and she didn't even know why. Flashback 4, the night before Chief collapsed. Zuri remembered hearing raised voices from her father's study. Naledi's voice sharp, cold. Chief's voice weak, frustrated. Then a slam. When Zuri entered, Naledi was already by his side, rubbing his back, playing the perfect wife. She told Zuri, "You stress him. Leave." Zuri listened. She walked away. And the next day, her father was unconscious. Standing in the present, holding all these memories, Zuri felt something break inside. Naledi didn't just win by luck. She planned it. She isolated Zuri, destroyed her credibility, and turned a father against his daughter. She didn't just steal money, she stole love. Grief mixed with rage. Zuri felt abandoned, betrayed, and utterly alone. Everyone expected her to disappear quietly, let the story die, and accept her humiliation. But as she wiped her tears, one truth became clear. She had only two choices now. Bow out quietly like a defeated child, or rise and fight like the woman Naledi never wanted her to become. The first time Zuri visited the company she had inherited, she expected something small but manageable, maybe old equipment, a few debts, a tired staff that needed motivation. But the moment she stepped through the rusted gates, her heart dropped. This wasn't a business. It was a graveyard. The factory yard was silent. Windows were cracked, machines were covered in dust, and weeds pushed through broken concrete. Inside, half the lights didn't even work. The air smelled like metal and failure. Papers were scattered across desks, unpaid bills, legal warnings, shutdown notices. And taped to the office door was the loudest truth of all, a red stamp that read "Final Notice, Bankruptcy Pending." Zuri stood there frozen. This wasn't just failing. It was dying. A thin, tired-looking receptionist approached her carefully. "Miss Adeyemi, we didn't think you'd actually come." Her voice shook, not from excitement but fear. She explained that employees hadn't been paid in months. Health insurance was canceled. Orders were backed up. Customers were gone. Suppliers pulled out. Workers were leaving one by one. Then came the real punch. Before your father passed, Mrs. Naledi withdrew all major accounts linked to this plant. Zuri blinked. Withdrew. Almost everything. Budget. Equipment funds. Maintenance. Even salaries. The woman lowered her voice. It's like she wanted this place to collapse. The truth hit hard. Naledi didn't just take Zuri's inheritance. She made sure whatever Zuri got was already burning to the ground. As Zuri walked deeper into the factory, she heard the grinding sound of one old machine struggling to run. A few loyal workers were still there, doing what they could. One man wiped sweat from his forehead and said, "We tried, Mississippi, but without resources we can't survive." Another added, "Investors won't even talk to us. They say this place is cursed." Later that day, Zuri tried contacting investors herself. Every call went the same. "Not interested. We're avoiding risky ventures. We don't trust inexperienced leadership." Some didn't even bother to hide the insults. A spoiled girl trying to act like a CEO? No thanks. Within 72 hours, 3 more employees resigned. Suppliers demanded payments Zuri didn't have. And rumors spread across Johannesburg that the plant would be shut down within weeks. People laughed online, calling her the billionaire's daughter who inherited a disaster. Commenters said she'd sell the land, disappear, or run back to Naledi begging. Even the board members who once praised her father refused to help her. No meetings, no advice, no support. To them, Zuri wasn't a leader. She was a countdown, one woman against a dying business. As she stood alone in the middle of the factory floor, surrounded by silent machines and flickering lights, the weight of everything pressed down on her. Abandonment, humiliation. She felt like the world had already buried her. But then something shifted, a tiny spark in her chest. Anger, determination, fire. She straightened her shoulders, wiped her face, and looked around at the ruins she'd been left with. Everyone expected her to collapse like the machines around her. Everyone was waiting to watch her fail. But Zuri wasn't done. She made one silent promise, not to the world, but to herself. Watch me. Zuri's life changed overnight. One week she was living in a penthouse, stepping out of luxury cars and eating at five-star restaurants. The next week, she was selling her car just to pay off the factory's emergency debts. People whispered that she was crazy. Some laughed, but Zuri didn't care. She needed cash, and she needed a fresh start. She packed her things into 2 suitcases and moved into a tiny one-room apartment on the edge of the city, a place with peeling walls, a noisy fan, and a mattress on the floor. No driver, no chef, no security, just silence and reality. It hurt, but strangely, it also woke her up. Every morning at sunrise, she took a crowded minibus to the factory, dressed in simple clothes, hair tied back, no makeup, no privilege. She worked beside the remaining employees, trying to understand every problem from the ground up. The factory was broken, but she refused to treat it like a lost cause. She believed there was something worth saving, not just for her, but for the country. That's when she met them, 3 workers who hadn't given up. Kwame, a quiet mechanic with hands rough from years of repairing machines no one believed in. Olu, a genius welder who could shape steel like art. Tandai, a young technician who understood energy systems better than some engineers. They weren't rich. They weren't famous. But they were skilled, loyal, and hungry for change. Instead of hiring big executives or expensive consultants, Zuri chose them. She sat with them in the dusty office one late night and said, "We rebuild together." From nothing. They exchanged surprised looks, but something in her voice, steady, fearless, made them believe her. The first step was brutal. Zuri studied every bill, every debt, every machine report. She realized something powerful. Africa's railway systems were expanding, and there was a rising need for renewable, environmentally friendly steel technology. Instead of competing with massive companies, she would pivot, turn the dying factory into Africa's first affordable renewable steel manufacturer. People laughed at the idea. Impossible, they said. Too expensive. Too risky. But Kwame fixed the dead machines using scrap parts. Olu redesigned steel frames to reduce weight. Tandai figured out how to power sections of the factory using solar grid. Slowly, painfully, the place came alive again. Their first contract was tiny, a small order from a local rail project. But when they delivered early, with high quality, the client was shocked. They recommended the factory to others. One small job turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. Soon, investors who once ignored Zuri began calling back. But this time, she wasn't begging. She was negotiating. Her leadership became the talk of Johannesburg. People admired how she worked on the floor, ate lunch with workers, and listened instead of commanding. Even the media changed their tone. Headlines shifted from Zuri failing to Zuri fighting, and then to Zuri winning. Within months, the factory that everyone predicted would die was running at full power. New workers were hired. Machines roared again. Money finally flowed in. Zuri hadn't inherited an empire. She was building one. Brick by brick, contract by contract, day by day. She rose from nothing, not as the billionaire's daughter, but as the leader no one saw coming. Johannesburg wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching, and they were cheering. While Zuri was grinding in factories and riding crowded minibuses, Naledi was living like royalty. She floated from private islands to penthouse parties, spending money like it could never run out. Luxury jets, designer wardrobes, gold-plated everything. She bought mansions she never visited, cars she never drove, even a diamond bathtub just because someone said it was exclusive. She wasn't building anything. She was burning through wealth like fire on dry grass. Then came the investments. Fast, flashy, stupid investments. Crypto scams. Risky casinos disguised as business deals. A luxury resort project in Dubai that never even broke ground. Naledi always thought she was the smartest person in the room, so she ignored advisors and surrounded herself with people who only said yes. And yes became her downfall. The first headline was small. Adeyemi funds lose millions. She brushed it off. The second headline was bigger. Luxury jet seized over unpaid fees. She blamed her staff. Then came the third. Gambling debt tied to Naledi Adeyemi. That one couldn't be ignored. Suddenly, reporters camped outside her mansion. Investors demanded answers. Former friends stopped taking her calls. The glamorous woman who once posed for magazine covers now hid behind dark sunglasses, dodging cameras. When her biggest investment collapsed, A fake tech startup she had poured hundreds of millions into. Everything unraveled. Banks froze her accounts. Properties went up for auction. Private security quit. Her jewelry collection was seized. And worst of all, people finally started saying out loud what they had whispered for years. She didn't earn anything. She just married money. The empire she flaunted wasn't real. It was borrowed, inherited, and mismanaged. And now it was gone. News stations replayed clips of her old interviews where she bragged about being the true power behind the Adeyemi legacy. They turned into memes. Social media users mocked her. Influencers roasted her fall like entertainment. Naledi, the woman who once looked down on everyone, became a joke. Soon, she had to sell her mansion. Then her cars. Then her art. The staff disappeared. The parties stopped. The invitations dried up. She went from VIP to invisible. And for the first time, she understood what fear felt like. She had mocked people without money. Now she was one of them. While Naledi's world crumbled, Zuri's world exploded in the opposite direction. Her renewable steel innovation caught the attention of global media. Documentary crews filmed her factory turnaround. Governments reached out for partnerships. International magazines called her the future of African industry. She was invited to speak at conferences. Investors chased her. Billionaires asked for meetings. Her name trended, not as the girl who failed, but as the woman who reinvented the game. One viral headline said it perfectly. While Naledi spent billions, Zuri built a future. Naledi had inherited power and wasted it. Zuri had inherited ruins and transformed them. The sharpest twist of all? The woman who once sat on a throne was now begging for relevance. While the woman everyone doubted was becoming unstoppable. Naledi had fallen from billion-dollar glory, and Zuri was rising higher than anyone imagined. It was late evening when Zuri finally got home from another long day at the factory. Her company was booming now. Phones ringing non-stop, contracts pouring in, workers celebrating new success. She kicked off her shoes, ready for silence, ready to breathe. But before she could even sit down, there was a knock at her door. Slow, weak, hesitant. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, she thought it was a reporter or a fan. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Naledi, not the sparkling, diamond-covered queen the world used to fear. Not the woman who arrived with bodyguards, cameras, and expensive perfume. This Naledi looked nothing like her past. Her hair was messy, her clothes plain and wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. No entourage, no jewelry, no confidence, just fear. She stood on the doorstep like someone who had nowhere else to go. Zuri, please, she whispered, voice shaky. I need to talk to you. Zuri didn't move. For a moment, she simply stared, emotionless, remembering every insult, every humiliation, every knife Naledi twisted behind closed doors. The woman who once smirked at her downfall now couldn't even hold eye contact. Naledi stepped inside slowly, like a woman walking into her own funeral. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands trembling. The silence between them was sharp. I know you hate me, Naledi began, voice cracking. But I deserve a second chance. Zuri didn't respond. She stood calmly, arms crossed, face unreadable. No anger, no tears, just quiet power. Naledi rushed on, desperate. Everything fell apart faster than I expected. The banks, the investors, the media, they turned on me. People I trusted disappeared. I lost everything. Her lip trembled. I never thought I'd be this. Zuri raised an eyebrow, her voice steady. This. Naledi swallowed hard. Desperate. The word hung in the air like a confession. She leaned forward, clutching her hands. You have influence now. Respect. Connections. People listen to you. If you help me, if you stand by me publicly, maybe I can rebuild. Maybe I can survive this. It was almost surreal. The same woman who once said, try not to embarrass his name, was now begging for mercy. Zuri's expression stayed cold. Why would I help you? Naledi's face twisted. Pain, shame, panic all at once. She hesitated, then finally whispered the real reason she was there. Because this isn't just bankruptcy. Her voice dropped to a terrified tremble. They're investigating me. Zuri's eyes sharpened. Investigating. Naledi nodded, tears spilling. Fraud. Financial manipulation. Illegal transfers. They think I stole money from the company before Chief died. She shook her head violently. If they prove it, I could lose everything. My freedom. My reputation. My life. For the first time, Naledi looked truly small. She wiped her face and whispered, they want statements. Witnesses. Documents. And the only person powerful enough to protect me now is you. Zuri stood still, heart steady, mind clear. The world had flipped. The hunter was now the hunted. And Naledi was finally sitting in the pain she once wished on others. Zuri didn't speak right away. She just stared at the woman who destroyed her life, now begging her to save it. Naledi didn't stop at begging. A few days after showing up at Zuri's door, she made a bold request. one that proved she still hadn't learned humility. Sitting across from Zuri in a small meeting room, she clasped her hands like a broken queen trying to rebuild a shattered throne. "I want to join your company," she said softly. "As a partner." Zuri almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. The same woman who once called her unworthy now wanted a seat at her table. Naledi tried to smile, forcing confidence she didn't have. "You need someone experienced," she continued. "Someone with status, connections, a recognizable face. Together, we could be unstoppable." Zuri leaned back in her chair, calm and unreadable. "You mean, you want me to rescue you?" Naledi's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Yes. I need your company. I need your name. If I attach myself to you, it might save me." For a moment, there was silence. Then Zuri stood up and said 5 simple words. "Meet me tomorrow." Boardroom. Naledi's eyes lit with hope. She thought this was her comeback. The next day, the grand conference hall was packed. Investors, executives, reporters, cameras, critics. Former board members who once dismissed Zuri. Everyone buzzed with excitement. Rumors swirled that Zuri might announce a merger, a partnership, maybe even Naledi's return to power. Naledi walked in wearing her last remaining designer suit, shoulders straight, trying to look important. People whispered, shocked to see her. She took a seat near the front, assuming she was the star of the moment. Then Zuri entered, confident, sharp, unshakable. The room rose to its feet. Cameras flashed. She wasn't the insecure girl from the will reading anymore. She was a force. She stepped up to the podium, microphone in hand, voice steady. "Thank you all for coming. Today marks a turning point, not just for this company, but for the legacy attached to the Adeyemi name." Naledi lifted her chin, ready to stand when invited. But she wasn't invited. Instead, Zuri clicked a remote, and a giant screen lit up behind her, showing documents, signatures, transactions. "I am announcing that over the last 18 months, I have quietly acquired every remaining asset once owned by Mrs. Naledi Adeyemi." A ripple of shock swept through the room. Properties, stocks, shares, patents, licenses, all transferred, all purchased, all now belonging to Zuri. Naledi shot to her feet, face pale. "What? You bought everything?" Zuri didn't even look at her. "Yes." Reporters gasped. Investors whispered. Cameras zoomed in on Naledi's stunned, trembling face. She wasn't just broke anymore. She was officially powerless. Zuri continued, her voice stronger than steel. "There will be no partnership, no shared leadership, no comeback story." Silence thickened. Then she turned, finally looking directly at Naledi, calm, composed, victorious. "You stole my inheritance," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "I built my legacy." The audience erupted, cheers, applause, disbelief. Naledi's knees buckled. The woman who once ruled with diamonds now stood with nothing. Zuri didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply walked away, leaving Naledi frozen in the ruins of her own choices. Power had changed hands, not through luck, but through strength, grit, and a revenge delivered in the most elegant way possible. In the same boardroom where Zuri was once humiliated. Weeks after the boardroom showdown, Zuri was still organizing the growing empire she had built from scratch. New contracts, new employees, new investors. Life had moved fast. Yet, in the quiet of her office late at night, a familiar envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored, with her father's seal. Zuri froze. Her hands shook as she broke the wax. Inside was a single folded letter, in handwriting she recognized instantly. Chief Kamau Adeyemi. She sat down, heart racing, and unfolded the paper. "My dearest Zuri," it began. At first, she thought it would be a fatherly apology, maybe regrets for not protecting her sooner. But as she read, her breath caught. Chief Kamau had left instructions, not apologies. He wrote about Naledi, not as a woman to be celebrated, but as a test. A challenge he had deliberately placed in Zuri's path. He explained that he had seen her potential from the very beginning, but potential alone wasn't enough. A legacy inherited is fragile. A legacy built is unshakable. Zuri's hands trembled as she read on. Her father had known Naledi would try to manipulate, to control, to steal. That had been part of the plan. He wanted to see what she was truly made of. Every obstacle, every moment of betrayal, every media headline, it was all a test. A trial by fire. He wrote about the factory she inherited, describing it as more than a failing business. "It is a forge," he said, "where your character, your skill, and your determination would be tested. The world may call it ruin, but the strongest steel is built under pressure." Zuri's eyes blurred with tears. For years, she had felt abandoned, betrayed, cheated. She had believed the world was against her. And yet here, in the careful strokes of her father's pen, she realized she had never been alone. He had trusted her to fight, trusted her to learn, trusted her to rise. Then came the final lines, and Zuri felt them like a hammer striking truth into her chest. "A fortune can be stolen. A mind cannot. Build your empire, Zuri. Build it with heart, with courage, with fire. Let no one else define your worth. Remember, power is not given, it is earned every single day. She folded the letter slowly, clutching it to her chest. The anger she had carried toward Nality, toward fate, toward the world, it softened, replaced by clarity and a strange sense of peace. Every betrayal, every challenge, every sleepless night had not been punishment. It had been preparation. Zuri smiled, a quiet, determined smile. She had already built her empire. She had already proven herself. And now she understood the truth. Her father had given her far more than money, far more than a company. He had given her the greatest inheritance of all, the knowledge that no one could ever take away her mind, her courage, her fire. For the first time, Zuri truly felt unstoppable. 6 years had passed since the day Zuri was left with nothing but a failing factory and a mountain of debt. Today, the world knew her name, and they said it with respect. At just 31, she had become Africa's youngest self-made industrial billionaire. Her company, once a dying steel plant in Johannesburg, had grown into a multinational powerhouse. Renewable steel projects in Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda were transforming rail systems across the continent, creating thousands of jobs and giving communities a real future. Zuri didn't stop at business. She remembered the girls in her neighborhood who had once told her engineering was not for girls. She remembered her own struggles, the people who doubted her, the doors that were closed. So she started a foundation for young African women in engineering, offering scholarships, mentorship, and hands-on training. She wanted every talented girl to know that their dreams were possible, that their work could change nations. Evenings were different now. Zuri no longer stayed buried in paperwork. Sometimes she walked the factory floors, shaking hands with engineers, talking with young women learning to weld, to code, to build. They looked at her with admiration, and sometimes with disbelief, that a girl who had been left with nothing could become this. On a bright morning, Zuri stood atop the headquarters she had built with her own hands, wind brushing her face. Below, the city buzzed, unaware of the empire rising above it. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Nality, the headlines, the betrayals, the struggles. She smiled. She got $1.4 billion, she whispered to herself, voice calm but full of power. I got purpose. And purpose won. In that moment, Zuri understood something no inheritance could teach. Real wealth wasn't measured in dollars, in jewels, or in titles. It was measured in impact, in courage, in the legacy you created. And Zuri Adeyemi's legacy had only just begun.